Oh, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary.
Welcome to the final Patio season episode of Ladies Talkin Leafs, and welcome to the 5th anniversary of our show. I'm Chris.
And I'm Sil.
Yes, 5 years of talking Leafs. I mean, it's been much more than that, obviously, for us, but 5 years of everyone seeing us talking Leafs, wherever you listen, wherever you're watching on YouTube or your favorite app, Apple, Spotify, and it's been amazing. Thank you to our listeners and followers on social media channels and to all of our YouTube subscribers. We're getting up there. We're almost hitting the 300 mark.
Woo!
Yay.
All right. So we also want to thank all of the guests that have made time to come on our show with us this year. It has been incredible, and we so appreciate the time that people have spent to come on and talk Leafs with us. And of course, we couldn't leave this segment without saying a very special thanks to our Ladies Talkin Leafs insider, Mike Agello, who comes on our show throughout the season and gives his insights on the Leafs.
Yeah. So thank you, Mike.
Yes.
And he'll be on soon again on another show with training camp coming up soon. So
absolutely.
Yeah. But a bit of business to take care of. Our show is presented by Bet Online, and with the NFL season getting going, Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games.
If you think you know your stuff, get in on our 200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at a weekly prize and a share of $200,000. That's a big pot. So when the game's over, you can also head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. So head to the website today, betonline.ag, to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. Please gamble responsibly, though. If you or someone you know needs support or advice, you can reach out to Connex Ontario or an organization near you. Place your limits and stay within it.
Okay, so we are in a celebratory mood because of the anniversary episode, but unfortunately, some really sad news happened. The hockey community was hit hard with the tragic passing of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. We all know Johnny Gaudreau as a star hockey player for 9 seasons. In the past 2 seasons, he was with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and the previous for 9 seasons, he was with the Calgary Flames. And then the past 2 seasons, he was with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So his younger brother, Matthew, also had a strong minor league career, playing 5 seasons in the ECHL.
Yeah, I think he was just starting to get into the coaching ranks as well.
Right.
Anyway, we are sending our deep condolences to the Gaudreau family and their friends, and to both the Calgary Flames and Columbus Blue Jackets organizations. I can't even imagine what that family is going through. As a parent, I have kids not that much younger than those 2 boys, and I can't even imagine what that would be like to lose them both at the same time. Anyway. Yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah, when I saw the news on X, that was the first thing I looked on Friday morning, and I saw that, and I'm like, what? I'm scrolling through, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, this is true.
I saw it too. Yeah. It makes me think twice about looking at my phone first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
It's not really the best way to start the day.
But it's just horrific, and condolences to the family as it's going to be a struggle to get through this. But the hockey community, sport brings people together. The hockey community is one of the best communities to support families, friends, in times like this. And that's what gets us through these tough times. So On a lighter note, we do have a show update to tell you about for this upcoming season. So stay tuned to the end of the show to find out about these details.
And so now it's time to get into this episode, starting off with our anniversary edition of the Ladies Talkin Leafs highlight reel. And then for our third period segment, we're going to get you set for the Leafs upcoming training camp with our guest, Nick Barden, who covers the Leafs and the Marlies for the Hockey News Toronto. So without any further ado, let's talk Leafs.
All right, so it's our 5th anniversary, so we are going to highlight our top shows from each of the past 5 years. So let's roll the Ladies Talkin Leafs highlight reel.
Okay, coming in at number 5, because of the pandemic, we're going to highlight 2 shows here. So our very first show, which happened September 2019, called Time to Meet Our Public, is our most listened to show from that 2019-20 season. And I think people probably still go back to it just to kind of find out a little bit about us. Yeah. Anyway, that season was suspended and the NHL resumed play in May 2020. Our most listened to show to complete the season, aka the bubble season, was No Season Like the Offseason from October 2020. So yes, that's this going back to our very early days.
Yeah. No, that was interesting because as I was scrolling through our shows and looking at the timelines and that, I was getting confused. And I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. And then with this, the No Season Like the Off Season, which was going into the off season of that bubble year, I guess, bubble season, like everything was off and the draft was actually held in October 2020. And it is sad. But that draft was the 2020 draft was the draft that we picked Rodion Amirov. So he was number 15 in that draft. So rest in peace, Rodion Amirov. But it was a different world then, and thankfully we're not in that anymore.
Hopefully not again.
And hopefully not again. Yeah.
Anyway, it's the thing that reminds me that I think about the most with that is, between those 2 shows in particular, at the beginning we were recording in person, and then when the pandemic hit, we had to quickly pivot to recording remotely. And, that kind of stuck because it worked out well. And, really, technology is great that way because, when there's a need, people fill it. So,
yes.
So now there's so many great options for, recording remotely and anything you could possibly, those are really sort of more the early days of podcasts as well. So things have really changed a lot since then.
Yeah. And I'm thankful to Sil for figuring it out for us when it comes to those, technical, the video, remote, recording and stuff like that. She's the expert in that field, but yeah, because we're still a 2-woman show too. So
I don't know if I'd call myself an expert, but I do try.
Yeah. And also with that too, it's going to this remote recording. We avoid traveling down the 401.
Yes. So that's nobody wants to do.
Yes. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. So coming in at number 4 from the 2020-21 season, which was the shortened 56-game season that started January 13, 2021. Our top show from that time was our May 5th, 2021 episode. It's all about the playoffs.
What strikes me there is, as much as things have changed, some things never change. And that title says it all.
Yeah.
It's always all about the playoffs.
Yeah. And so that was the season with the North Division.
Yep.
And
a lot expected of our Leafs.
And the addition of Nick Foligno that didn't work out.
Pan out.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was so much excitement to have him join the team and his dad being the former Leaf and I guess scoring a goal in those 93 playoffs that were, we experienced that back then. But yeah, and I thought it was funny too. The whole issue, I guess, during those playoffs too, was because they had that Canadian division. It was once the playoffs, I guess the winner of the Canadian division comes out, if they had to go to the States or vice versa, like to play the Canadian team, there was a 14-day quarantine. enter the country. So yeah, there was a lot of things to deal with back in that time. And again, thankfully, and hopefully moving forward, we won't have to go through that again.
Yeah. And we'll never have to play against Carey Price again either, which.
Yeah.
All right. So for number 3 from the 2021-22 season, where things started to get back to normal, but unfortunately the season ended with a familiar playoff loss in Game 7 to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And our top episode was Talkin' Playoffs, who showed, who didn't, and the ladies stand up for Leafs Nation. So yes, same old. And again, we have to defend ourselves because you know, there's the criticism again about the fan base, but yeah.
And that was the one where we were actually leading the series 3-2, and we were leading in Game 6 as well, but managed to lose. And then again, we lost in Game 7 at home too, with Nick Paul scoring the winner.
Right.
In overtime. So yes,
disappointing again.
As much as the anniversary, it's our anniversary episodes, but it's like a lot of disappointment here too, right in the end. But we still love the Leafs.
And the fact that these episodes are the most popular just lets you know that, you know, Leafs Nation needs to commiserate and needs to share in this pain. So, All right. Coming in at
number 2 is the 2022-23 season. Ended up being the final season for Kyle Dubas as GM of the Leafs. Our top show was one of the positive moments from Dubas's time here. Our March 1st episode, Talkin' Leafs, new acquisitions, and Dubas's dealings leading up to trade deadline day. So that was the year we got Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari and Luke Shen. So I'd say that was a pretty good time for Kyle Dubas to get those players, and it got us over the top in the playoffs. We finally won the round, the first round, even though again it didn't end so well in the second round. But it gave Leafs Nation something to cheer about for a change. It'd been a long time. We were able to let off some steam, and it was really great to welcome those players, even if it was only for a short time. So Our number 1 show from last season, no big surprise here. Talkin' Leafs with Jackie Redmond and See You Soon, Sverige. So this is Jackie Redmond, amazing guest. She was so gracious to come on with us. She actually was traveling and still came on with us. After she got in from her flight, she was just so generous with her time. And of course, she's interviewed so many players, and she's a very popular guest. And so, we were really happy to have her on, talking with us ladies. So, and then we got to meet her in person at the All-Star game too. Yeah. So that was great. And, and then that was our show previous to just going on our trip to Sweden, to watch that, epic performance by William Nylander. So that was great too. So,
so it was definitely, like for however the season ended, that was like a really moving into a good time for the Leafs, during the season last season. That was kind of leading into that, our best kind of stretch. And, so it was good times.
Yeah.
All right. So that was our trip down memory lane, and it was a wild ride. You can find all our episodes on Believe.com or your favorite podcast app. We'll also post these episodes in our show notes for you, so you can have a listen if you haven't had a chance to do so before. So now it's time to focus on today. And for our third period segment, we're going to be talking Leafs and Marlies with Nick Barden, contributor to the Hockey News Toronto.
All right, so we're about 2 or 3 weeks away from the opening of the Leafs training camp, and to give us some insight on the Leafs prospects and players who have been with the Marlies is Leafs and Marlies reporter Nick Barden.
So Nick is a contributor for the Hockey News Toronto, and you can follow him on X at his handle, which is at Nick Barden, to get his latest articles on the Leafs. So welcome to the show, and thank you so much for coming on, especially given that this is a long weekend here and in the States.
No worries. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's exciting. It's nice to have something to talk about, especially hockey as it comes back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll get into it off the top here. So it's September. Yay. That means Leafs training camp is around the corner. But in August, you wrote a series of articles for the Hockey News where you highlighted the top 10 prospects in the Leafs organization. And with training camp coming up, can you tell us a bit more about a few Leafs prospects who we should be keeping an eye on? I guess who you've watched with the Marlies as well, coming in camp.
And I especially want to hear about the goaltenders because I feel like this is like the first time in a while that we actually have quite a lot in the pipeline there. So
yeah, I'll start off with the goaltenders. Actually, it's a very I find having a lot of goaltenders in an organization as a double-edged sword. Like it is very good. Like it's very exciting. Like you have a guy like Joseph Woll who's pretty much almost solidified himself as the next goaltender of the Leafs. And then you have Dennis Hildeby, who could also be that. And then you have a few others. There's honestly so many, and then you have Matt Murray too. So I think when you have so many guys like Dennis Hildeby, I think Arthur Aktiamov, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Vyacheslav Peksa, there's a lot of goaltending to go around, but only so many spots on a team. Like when you look at the Leafs, it's probably going to be just Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz, and then the Marlies, it's Dennis Hildeby, and it could be Matt Murray. And then do the other two Russians go to the ECHL? I don't know, but it's very good to have that many goalies, especially in an organization like the Leafs where they've struggled a lot in, I guess, the past 10 or 15 years, or maybe even longer, to find a goaltender. But it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be exciting to see. It's always fun to see new goaltenders come, especially two guys in Peksa and Aktiamov, who are apparently really fun characters off the ice. So
from what I've seen, that they're really interesting guys. But you make a good point that there's only so much ice to go around, and you need to also develop these guys, right? So it'll be interesting to see. Like I say, there's a high ceiling for those two Russians in particular. I think just by the way they've both played, I think Aktiamov has been really good in Russia, and it'll be interesting to see how he translates here. I mean, the one thing I did write in the article, I think, was that when you look at players who are coming from Russia, it might be a little bit more difficult for them in their first year, just because it might be a little bit of, I don't want to say culture shock, but like there's so many different things that we do here that might be different in Russia. The language is different. You're going into basically a team or like a place of work where everyone speaks English and you might not know English that well. So I think you have to give some grace to a few of these guys, especially those coming from overseas, because it's not all going to flick all at once with how good they play. So I think the good thing about them coming here is that they might not have a full pro season at the end of this year. Like they might be with Toronto at some points, be in the ECHL at some points. It's going to bounce around. So I think the good thing and the positive is that there will be some time for them to, get their things sorted and everything.
Yeah, they'll get a taste of it. I guess the North American game,
so I think,
and style.
I think that'll be the good thing, is that they won't just straight off the bat go and start playing pro hockey. I think, like Dennis Hildeby did. I know Peksa was here last year and he was with the Marlies, and then he was with the Newfoundland Growlers. He went back and forth. So this year will sort of be an interesting one for him. But Aktiamov, I think he's proven himself in Russia. I think there's a chance for him to come here and do the same. It's just, I think a little bit of time will be needed before you actually look at wherever he plays and his numbers, where he plays, and give a solid analysis of, like, I guess his goaltending and how he's playing.
Right.
But the goaltenders are an interesting bunch.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. And is there, I guess you had Easton Cowan as number one in the
Yeah.
Leafs, obviously, organization for the prospects. Do you think he has a legitimate chance to make the team this year? Or do you think they'll send him back to London or to have the extra year there?
I think he'll make the team, or he'll either make the team. I think he'll stick with the team out of camp. I think similar
so
to
he'll
I
get
guess
like that 9-game look.
Yeah,
at least.
similar to Fraser Minton. I think he would have to have a really, really strong outing for them to really consider keeping him past that. I think it's 9 or 10 game mark to burn that first year off his ELC. I think he has all the tools and everything, and I think whether Nick Robertson remains with the team or not, I think that was
my question. Next thought that popped into my mind is that could have an impact on some of that, right?
So if Robertson's not here, I think there's more of a possibility that Cowan remains with the Leafs past that 9 or 10 game threshold. I think when you look at his type of game, I think it is suited for the NHL. It's just whether or not he's really ready for that sort of grind. I think he could be. It's just a matter of, again, like if there's spots, if he impresses, if he really plays strong against bigger and stronger guys. Like that's, I think the biggest thing. It's always a challenge for a lot of guys, whether it's coming out of college, whether it's sometimes even coming out of Europe, is whether or not they can handle that strong, physical, big style of game. Cause I see it at the AHL a lot. You look at guys and they dominate in their lower leagues, and then they come, and one of the biggest challenges is how to use their body against guys who are 200, 210 pounds. So
yeah, especially when I guess they're going in obviously on an NHL defense. Let's just say if it's those top guys, like with whether it be Tampa or Colorado or
exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I do think there is a chance for Cowan to make it. I think Fraser Minton's another interesting one because he's going to play in the AHL this year. I think there's so many things I feel like with the Leafs that are still unsolved going into training camp. Like who's going to be their 3C? Is Nick Robertson going to be on this roster? Is Yanni Hakanpää going to play? Like all of these things, they're still unanswered, and like it's so difficult to really wrap your head around what is going to happen or even what it's going to look like. Like when you look at Nick Robertson, he didn't really get much of an opportunity under Sheldon Keefe, but he could get that more of an opportunity under Craig Berube. So,
but he still seems so resistant to that idea.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, why do you think, like, I don't know. I think he's going to be given an opportunity now, I guess, but I don't understand why he's sticking to his guns. Like, I mean, the Leafs organization, like it has from all accounts from players that have played here, like it's a great place. Like they have everything available to them. Right. But I don't know. And I guess maybe, do you think he doesn't think he'll fit under the style of Craig Berube, or?
I don't know. It's an interesting one. Like, he's not the biggest guy, and Brad Treliving likes big guys. I don't think that is a factor in any of it. I think that, I guess it really depends on the type of game that Berube wants to play, and maybe there was conversations that he had with Berube that maybe, I guess, tilted his mindset a little bit. But I don't know. He's always, to me, talking to him at some points, he's always been an interesting guy. He's always wanted to be an NHL player. He's always wanted to be a guy who could be relied upon.
He also has probably the competition too with his brother, right? In Dallas doing so well. He wants to match Jason Robertson there. Yeah.
I think that's also a big thing that he probably looks at, and he's probably a really competitive guy. And, I don't know. Maybe it's the type of players that are in Toronto. Maybe he wants a better suited center that could play with him. I'm not sure. I'm just really spitballing at this point because it's an interesting situation. It's really, I don't want to say odd, because it's a lot of players do want to move on from an organization and get another opportunity somewhere else. But for a guy who he hasn't really proven himself as a solidified player. And it's interesting that he's trying to be the one who demands the trade, be the one who like says like, I'm not signing here, because he hasn't really shown that he is a full-time NHL player. I know he obviously, I think we know and everyone knows he has that potential in him. It's just that injuries have stacked up and everything. So maybe it is just the fact that he wants a new fresh start somewhere. And if that's the case, I totally understand it, because he has had a rough go with injuries and everything, but it's a fascinating situation for sure.
Yeah. I wonder who's advising him as well, because you would think that, you know, like you just said about his stats, like, you know, that's basically the first thing people are going to look at. You kind of wonder if people shouldn't be telling him, why don't you use this year to really show what you've got? And but that's the other thing. We don't know if the Leafs are really, you know, saying, you know, we're really going to give you 100% a shot here.
Yeah.
But maybe he knows they're not. But I would think that's what you would want, to really put some better numbers underneath you, because really all he has is his, you know, goals for 60, right? Which is, you know, second to Matthews. And that's pretty much it. So as far as points and things like that. So before we move on from this section, is there one other guy that you think that we should be watching for, kind of like a dark horse or something?
Like in terms of prospects or in terms of training camp? Oh, prospects.
Yeah.
That's a good question, because there are a lot. I do think I feel like this would be such a niche answer, or not a niche answer, but like an answer that a lot of people would have. I think Nikita Grabenkin, however you pronounce his name. I think he'll be an interesting guy when it comes to training camp and when it comes to where he plays. I think there's a lot in his game that suits the NHL. I think a lot of it would suit the AHL too. I think you could see him not make the Leafs out of training camp, go to the Marlies, and I think have a really strong showing there where he is pushing the cusp of being a potential NHL player over the course of the season. But I mean, I could say that, and he could come into training camp and be a solid player for the Leafs. So I think he's one that if you look at the way he plays and you look at where he could fit and how he's done and, you know, in Russia and everything, I think he could be a solid dark horse for someone who could make the Leafs out of training camp, or be like a guy who could be called upon from the Marlies in the early goings of the season.
All right. Well, that's a guy we're going to look out for, and Lord knows we need people to step up. So another bit of recent Marlies news was the hiring just recently of former Leaf Steve Sullivan as the assistant coach to head coach John Gruden. So can you tell us a little bit about Sullivan and how it came to pass that he joined the Leafs? I mean, it's very new, so I don't even know if there's like a lot of info out there.
Yeah.
So I do think, like, early on in the Marlies last season, one of their coaches, Eric Wellwood, he was the coach of the Newfoundland Growlers, and I believe he won a Kelly Cup with them. He was brought in as one of the assistant coaches to John Gruden when Gruden was hired. I don't even think it was I don't even think the season had started before it was announced that he was taking a medical leave. Okay. I'm not sure what type of medical leave that was. I wasn't really given much information, and they wanted to sort of be private with that, and that's totally understandable. So he never returned, and then Rich Clune was obviously hired to be the assistant coach. And with Clune going to Anaheim, I guess there was an opening, and I guess Sullivan was that guy. I don't really know too much about Sullivan in terms of, I know obviously his history and where he was, but in terms of what he might be with the Marlies, I know Clune was the power play coach, so it could be that Sullivan is that guy. But with the hiring of Sullivan, it doesn't appear that Wellwood will be back in the organization, because he's not listed as an assistant coach. And the Marlies specifically specified in their press release that there was only one assistant coach along with Sullivan, and that was Michael Dix. So I believe that's sort of how this all came to be.
Right. Do you think, like with John Gruden, I guess I heard earlier in the season, I think I read in your article about the hiring of Steve Sullivan, like he was considered possibly for like the job with the Senators, right? And he obviously didn't get that. Travis Green got that. But do you think, like, is Sullivan maybe, I guess, possibly looking at being a head coach eventually too? Like, have you heard anything like that? Because I didn't even know that John Gruden, I didn't know that he was an assistant with the Bruins before in that historic season. I had no idea. So obviously he's going to want to probably move into an NHL coaching job. But I was thinking of maybe Steve Sullivan. I didn't know much about him either. But if he maybe has head coaching aspirations,
it could be. Right? I mean, it was interesting last year because when the Newfoundland Growlers sort of closed up shop, Matt Cook, who was their coach, he came to the Marlies and spent some time with the Leafs and the Marlies. He was at practices at some points. So I'm very surprised that he wasn't someone who they looked at.
Right.
Maybe they did, and maybe Sullivan was just the better guy. But I could see Sullivan being that person. I know. Like during the season last year, I believe it was the Athletics' Joshua Cloak who did ask Gruden at a Marlies practice if the rumors about him going to Ottawa were true, and I believe he shut them down right away and said he isn't interested in coaching there.
Right.
But the Sullivan thing is interesting. It could be that he has aspirations of being a head coach in the future. It's interesting because when you load up all of these guys, like who have been assistant coaches in the NHL, or the AHL, or whichever way you want to go, you got a lot of like smart minds, and it could bode well for the Marlies in terms of just development and everything else, because they are, I'd say, a more development first team rather than winning.
Right.
But the Sullivan hire is really, it's an interesting one.
And of course, Leaf fans remember him in the late 90s. Yeah, I think it was still really
day for me. Yeah. It took a long time for me to come around on him because he got traded for Doug Gilmour. So
that's
how he came to the Leafs. Dougie went out the door.
Yeah. So, but he was a speedy winger, sir, and had a lot of
really accurate shot. Like I remember, I don't know what show it was on. It might have been a Hockey Night in Canada segment or something where he basically blew out all 4 targets so fast.
Oh, wow.
And he's really good at that. So he has a great shot, fast guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going back to the late 90s there, he spent 4 seasons with the Leafs. But, all right. So we're going to move on to the big club now. And you kind of answered this question a little bit earlier with all the questions going into camp, but what do you think is the biggest one out of going into this regular season for the Leafs too? Like, what's the biggest question mark, would you say?
I know a lot of people would say defense.
Mm-hmm.
I really think their defense has, I wouldn't say they've upgraded a lot. I feel like it's gotten better. A lot of people I know wouldn't agree with that. I think the biggest question mark for me is, I want to say the left wing, like their left wing options. I would say center too, because I don't really know how they're going to look at that. Like I look at their center depth and I look at Matthews, and I'd say Tavares being the 1-2.
Right.
But then who's the number 3? Like you'd have Ponce Holmberg, you'd have Max Domi, but would Max Domi rather be on a left wing role or whatever? So I think one of the big question marks is center, but I would say left wing. I think if Robertson does not remain with this team, I think you have an interesting question of their depth there. I think you have Matthew Knies, obviously. I think Bobby McMahon is someone who could play a key role in their top 6 if Robertson does go. But then when you look at the other, like the bottom 6,
There's not much there.
No, like
it's always the issue though, right? Like when are they going to be able to ever get that part right? Like, I don't know.
Are you liking the idea of Max Pacioretty possibly? Like,
I don't. They've done the Leafs have done this plenty of times where they try and bring guys who
some
are
old
not,
guy.
Yeah, I guess like guys who have played really well in their careers, and then as they're nearing the end, they think, I don't know, the Leafs think it's a good idea to bring them in. Like I think
he's injury prone also. Like that's a big question mark with him to me. I think he's hardly played any hockey in the last 3 years.
Yeah, so it would be an interesting ad. I think it would be very fascinating. But at the same time, like Joe Thornton was a fascinating ad, and he really couldn't do much. I think Wayne Simmons was a fascinating ad, and he did well in his first couple of years, but then he found it I think his final year, he found it really difficult to make the team and be in the lineup all the time. I think Jason Spezza was the only guy that always stuck. But I mean, you never know. Like guys could come back. Like you look at Joe Pavelski, and he's still doing crazy things.
Well, I have a JVR jersey, so that would help me.
That would be a cool one, especially after he eliminated the Leafs last year.
Yeah. But
and I think if you were to take a guy like JVR and put him back, like he knows Marner, he knows Matthews. Like I think that would be an interesting one. Max Pacioretty, though, I don't know if I like it too much just because injury prone, but I don't know if they should go the old route and pick a guy who's played well over the course of his career, and then as he's approaching.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to break free of that mold.
Yeah.
And
you mentioned Bobby McMahon. I guess like just because you saw him with the Marlies more as well. So would you worry about him becoming more injury prone too as a winger? Because with the Leafs, or like I think he had a few injuries with the Marlies too, right?
I think with him, one of the injuries he did have, I believe, I'm forgetting the word, but I think he had an abductor injury, sort of like what Matt Murray had. I can't remember if it was 100% that or his groin. I think they're around the same area, but I've learned that when you have an injury like that, it can affect the rest of your body and how much you would extend to another muscle or another area of your body. So I know he did have issues with that at one point. So that could be something, but I would say with McMahon is, I think when you look at his injuries history, he's been injured at times where it's been crucial that he's in the lineup. And I feel like that sort of overshadows his injuries and when they've come, or not when they've come, but like how many injuries he's had. Yeah. Like they came at key times rather than him having very many of them. Like I think in back-to-back seasons, he's had injuries that have kept him out. Like I think 2 seasons ago, he had been up with the Leafs and he got injured, and then I think he tried to return for the Marlies playoffs, and I can't remember if he played the last game or not. And then this past year, he got injured right before the season ended. I think with McMahon, he's a very strong player. He's a guy who can play an NHL game, and I think injuries aside, he is someone who could be of strong importance. Like I was looking at his contract number before I even came on here, and I'm just like, at one point, I think it was $3 million. You can't go wrong with that. That type of player.
That's definitely what we need with the given the salary cap situation and given our I guess lack of depth at left wing, like we were talking about. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I do think he's a guy who I don't want to say a big Bobby McMahon fan, but watching him like over the years, seeing how much work he's put in, it's really cool to see him be the NHL player that he is.
It's a great story as well, no doubt, knowing, how hard he's worked to get there. So one final one for you. What are your thoughts on the transfer of the captaincy from John Tavares to Auston Matthews?
For me, I think, I don't know. A lot of people have asked me that question. I think, I think when you look at, there were reports that he was supposed to be the captain before all of that stuff happened. And I did go to Winners at one point and I did see an Auston Matthews jersey that had a C on it. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, if the time, I guess it's just, I don't know. I don't know really what to think. I think that, if there's a time that Auston Matthews becomes the captain, it's probably the best time to be right now, like especially in his prime. I think he is the face of the organization as much as Tavares is, good at answering questions and willing to step in front of the media at all times and all of that stuff. I do think he is a true captain. I think that at the same time, a guy like Matthews, again, who is the face of the organization, it just had to be at some point him being with the Leafs. It had to be a time where he was captain. And it also shows how much of a true captain Tavares is by letting the captaincy go and being there when Matthews was being named the captain and all of that stuff.
Do you think that in the room is gonna hopefully galvanize a little bit more of the group that way? Like the fact that Tavares did that, like
I think so. I think that is something that isn't talked about as much. That point of view is like that he's handed over the captaincy and that could bring them closer together. I know people have talked about how much it will change in the room and everything like that and who speaks up and everything. I don't know how much that will change. It probably won't much, but I do think, like you said, like Tavares, like allowing this to happen and everything, I think it could bring them closer together and it could, I guess there's so many ways it could go with where they go in the playoffs and all of that stuff. But I do think that, like you are right, it would bring them closer together for sure.
Yeah. And giving up something like, that everybody talks about in the whole hockey world with the Leafs salary cap situation, how nobody gave up a single penny. Well, I guess, it's different, obviously, but it's obviously John Tavares. He loved being the captain of the Maple Leafs. So for him, like that, it's huge. And I think, Morgan Rielly, especially, I think really, being another huge leader on the team, I think he sees it that way too. And, I just hope that it does give us a little bit of an extra push. But we got 82 games to get through. So before we get to that point. Yeah.
All right, Nick. Well, that's all we have for you today. We want to thank you again so much for coming on our show and being a guest with us today. We really appreciate it. And we reserve the right to pick your brain on everything Marlies again in the future because you do have incredible insights. So everyone, you can check out Nick's articles on thehockeynews.com and please do follow Nick on X at Nick Barden. So thanks again, Nick, and we will talk to you again. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay. So, that was a great interview with Nick. So much information when it comes to the two Russian goalies with the Marlies. And, like we talked about with him, Leafs always seem to have a need there in that position, with the injuries that we've had. And you never know with Joseph Wall and Anthony Stolarz. It's probably going to be needed. One of those, whether it be Dennis Hildeby or who knows, maybe one of those Russian goaltenders will will get a chance. But then there's Matt Murray, of course, too. But yeah, no, he had some great information talking about Easton Cowan, Bobby McMahon, Nick Robertson going to the bit with his situation with the Leafs. So yeah, thank you to Nick for coming on the show.
Yeah, and he also highlighted, some pretty significant needs that the big club still has. And so I kind of wonder in these next 3 weeks if things are going to move a little bit, or if they're going to, make any moves as far as trades or anything like that coming into training camp, or if they're just going to wait and see. But it seems like there's still some big positions that need to be filled. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of a trade possibility, before we came on the show, I actually saw I guess a rumor has it with the Blues, St. Louis Blues, we get Colton Parayko. And we send out the door Timothy Liljegren, Fraser Minton, Nick Robertson, and David Kampf.
For one guy?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's a little bit
too much.
A little bit much for me, but I wonder if there will be some more coming from St. Louis's side as well. I mean, we're saying we have holes, and they're going to basically shove out the door all those guys, and just for one player,
especially in the bottom end of our lineup, we have a lot of holes. Yeah. I
don't know.
That was a little tidbit that I saw.
Interesting. We'll keep our eye out for that. Anyway, this is our final Patio season episode, and with the new season coming, we have an update to tell you about. We're going to be going weekly in the 2024-25 season. We're going to have our regular full-length episode on the first Wednesday of each month, and then 2 weeks later, also on a Wednesday, our second one. But in between, we're going to be offering you an additional show called Quick Hits, and it will be available in the off week from our full-length episode. We're going to try to keep it to a Wednesday, but depending on the schedule, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So make sure you subscribe. That's the best way. Subscribe on YouTube to watch us, and follow us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also you can listen on Believe.com. It's BLEAV.com.
Anyway, we want to thank you for listening and watching Ladies Talking Leafs and getting us to where we are in our 6th season covering the Leafs. So definitely, as Chris said, hit that subscribe button where you listen to our show, and we'll keep you up to date on everything going on with the team.
You can also find us on the Believe Network at Believe.com, and you can watch the show on YouTube, where we also have a ton of videos, and we're going to have even more this upcoming season, and hopefully during training camp too. We might have some bonus stuff there, and from games that we've attended at Scotiabank Arena and road trips that we've gone on too. We hope to go on another road trip this season.
Yet to pick that out, so we don't know where we're going to go this year yet, but.
Yeah, still some time. So again, hit that subscribe button and you won't miss a thing when it comes to the Leafs. At the same time, please consider leaving us a rating or review. It's so easy on Apple and Spotify, and it's important for our show to get recognized as a source for Leafs content, and we thank you for taking the time.
Another way to help us out is by visiting our Ko-fi page at Ko-fi.com. You can follow us there. And if you choose to, you can support us by buying us a coffee. Any donation goes towards helping us produce the show and making it even better for you. So you can find the link to our Ko-fi page on our show notes or in any of our social media profile pages.
And thank you to our healthcare workers and first responders for everything that they do.
And we thank you for always listening and watching Ladies Talkin Leafs, presented by Bet Online. Till next time, go Leafs, go.
Do you believe?